Welcome to the COVID Vid Show. My name is Cody, and I will be your host today. Today, I am joined by Joan Lawrence. She is a freelance writer, an interpretive planner, and a board member for the Calgary Climate Hub. Thanks for joining me here today, Joan.
Greetings from Treaty 7 territory. How are you today?
Doing great, doing really good. How are you doing over there in Alberta land?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, it's a beautiful day, nice and sunny. So we're getting ready for the polar vortex to hit. So I've got to have some time to get outside today, I think.
It's hit here. It's pretty cold here. It's gotten these last couple of days. It's been hitting minus 20, minus like 30. It's just out of nowhere. We've been pretty spoiled up until now, so it was inevitable. I thought we could get going with you going over a little bit about the Calgary Climate Hub and what it is exactly you do as a board member, and what kind of initiatives the hub takes part in.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the Calgary Climate Hub is part of a national network of climate hubs and local organizations all across Canada, and we're under the umbrella of the Climate Reality Project Canada, which was an initiative started by Al Gore. Basically, the idea is that the real place for action is at the municipal level for climate change, because municipalities have the keys to a lot of the decisions that result in most of the emissions. So things like transportation and building planning and waste. So our mission is to educate and empower Calgarians to become active climate citizens. And we have a couple of ways of doing that. We have community climate conversations, which is where we go out into the community and have events where people can come together and talk with their friends and neighbors and climate experts and just have a chance to talk about climate. Then a few weeks later, we have what's called an activation conversation, where people who are interested in doing something, taking further action, can come together and form a group to take on a specific project. We also run a show similar to what you're doing, called A Climate of Change. And that's where we talk with Canadian leaders about how the pandemic is affecting climate and climate change action. And then finally, we also do campaigns. So we advocate to City Hall about specific initiatives such as transit or urban planning.
What do you do professionally outside of the hub?
Professionally, I run a small business as a freelance writer and interpretive planner. And what that means is I write panels for museum exhibits and parks. Most of my work has been in Alberta, but I have done some work in BC as well. The Climate Hub, I'm co-chair of the HR node, which means that I help supervise our limited contractor staff. I also help run campaigns, do some of their writing for them. I do some writing for the website, for the blog and the newsletter and that sort of thing. When COVID first hit, our co-chair of the board, Dr. Joe Vipond, is an emergency room physician. And so he was pretty much focused on doing his day job. So I stepped in and helped just kind of keep the organization running and doing a little bit of everything to kind of pick up some of the slack. So Now that the vaccine is here, he's able to step back in and take on more of the things that he was doing before. So that's been great.
To get into the kind of the effect the pandemic has had on you professionally, on the board, and as a community, what have you had to change this last year about how you go about your initiatives, how you reach the community?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing, of course, is not being able to do in-person events. And so for our climate conversations, we can't go to neighborhoods anymore and bring people together. So we had to pivot and figure out how to do those online. And to give us some time to figure that out, we decided to start doing the webinar series, the Climate of Change series. So that's a whole new initiative that we weren't doing before. And so that's been really kind of exciting, actually. Yep. It means that we could have speakers that we wouldn't have been able to do if we had to bring them in person. And we've reached an audience that we wouldn't have reached either. We've had viewers from Japan watching our shows live, which is fantastic. Yeah. So that's been really exciting and good. And now we have figured out how to do the conversations on Zoom and bring people together. And it's been a little bit challenging. We haven't had as many people participating as we would. So we're really looking forward to being able to run events in person again. In terms of advocacy, It's been harder to do some of the actions like demonstrations, showing up and really showing our numbers. In some ways, it's also been easier. It's been easier to get meetings with city councilors because we don't have to physically go there and schedule. You know, we can do one after another, which is great and exhausting. Normally, city council meetings, they take all day. Sure. And you don't know exactly when you're going to speak. They're a government, they're dealing with lots of different things. Presenting in person can be quite challenging and time consuming, and you really have to take the full day. Now you do it online, I call in, and so I can continue working and doing other stuff while I'm waiting for my chance to speak. I don't know that it's been as impactful because you're not standing there.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Do you think it's as effective or as impactful?
There's been trade-offs, I think. On the one hand, it is less personal, but on the other hand, because it's a little bit easier, we've been able to get more people to participate. Before COVID, we'd maybe have one person go and present. And at the last council meeting where we presented, which was the budget, we had 5 or 6 people presenting. And so instead of just 5 minutes, we got 15, 20, 25 minutes. So that was really good.
So as somebody who's worked a lot in the tech industry and thought about the tech industry and thought about communicating and documenting and all that in the tech industry, one interesting side effect is that a lot of that can be recorded and documented in a lot easier way and distributed to people across the world in a much easier capacity than maybe before.
Yeah, that has also been a really nice thing, is that we've been able to participate in meetings with other organizations and in ways that we hadn't really done before. So that's been really good. Yesterday, I was talking to Energy Efficiency Canada, and they're in Ontario and Winnipeg, I think.
Okay.
Just to talk about coordinating things about the National Building Code.
Right.
And I mean, we could have talked to them before, but it's just much more comfortable to do it on Zoom and more personal and figure out ways to collaborate and work together.
Do you have a specific memory that stands out to you of, like, it could be personal, could be professional, of just like, wow, okay, this pandemic is doing something to the way we live our lives?
Yeah, and it's personal. I remember back in March, there was this thing called the window walk that somebody had put together a list of what to put in your windows every week that kids could walk around the neighborhood and look at things. And I went for a walk with my son around St. Patrick's Day, and that week we were all supposed to put shamrocks in the windows. And he said, how come I never knew this was a thing, that people would put shamrocks in their windows for St. Patrick's Day? And I said, well, it wasn't a thing. This is the first year that we're doing this, and maybe that'll be it now. Maybe it will be a thing. And that's kind of when I thought, yeah, we're creating whole new traditions and doing things in a completely different way. That even going for a walk around the neighborhood with my son was kind of a different experience. He's 18, so it's not really a thing.
The number of family walks have gone through the roof this year, probably, just people walking with their kids.
Yeah, and just how busy the parking lots were for going for hikes and that kind of thing. Like, just how many people were outside.
Early in the pandemic, we actually did travel to Alberta. Went on some hiking trails. We went to Banff and stuff, and cool to see how a lot of people were embracing the outdoors in a time when, you didn't have much else to do and still socially distancing. And in Manitoba, we have a lot less options when it comes to, like, beautiful nature.
Not as many mountains.
Not as many mountains. I think when we would walk around Alberta every once in a while, and I would turn to my wife and I'd just say, "This is proper wilderness." Not back in Manitoba. This is proper wilderness right here. It looks real.
The prairie is beautiful too.
It is.
Just takes it. It's a more subtle beauty. It takes more getting to know it.
It does. Yeah. It does. It's different, and it's in its own beauty.
Yeah,
for sure. Moving towards climate change as a topic, my first thoughts of thinking about climate change in this pandemic is that, in some ways, our carbon footprints have probably reduced drastically as individuals, right? For a lot of us working from home, we're not driving. A lot of people aren't traveling. We're probably buying less groceries, buying less plastics in general. But then there are other feelings that I have that I wonder about. Delivery has probably gone through the roof. From your perspective, is there anything backing up one way or the other that the global pandemic at a individual or global level has affected climate change to some degree?
Yeah, I think it has. More so at the very beginning when everybody was staying home. There were the pictures of blue sky in New Delhi, and there was, well, you definitely noticed less traffic. And I know that we didn't spend as much on gas.
Yeah.
And of course, that flying definitely has had an impact. Overall, the amount of demand for oil has dropped a little bit, not hugely significant. And in terms of emissions or CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, we've actually gone up. Our carbon budget is 450 parts per billion in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide. And 10 years ago, we were at 391. This time last year, we were at 413. And this week, we were at 415. We've gone up even since last year. So I think one of the things that we need to be aware of is we haven't changed the whole system. We put it on a pause, and that was good, but we need to change a much larger way of how we do things in order for us not to just keep doing emissions when everything goes back to normal. So there's some exciting work being done on how to address our carbon footprint. And today is a good day for climate because the American administration that just got sworn in takes climate change seriously and is actually going to take some action. There's also people working on not just reducing our emissions, but actually drawing down the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. A man called Paul Hawken got a whole bunch of researchers together, and it's called Project Drawdown.
Okay.
So so there's lots of things that we can do, and also to really focus on the green recovery. As the government is putting stimulus money into the economy to get things going again, that we're choosing wisely where we put that stimulus money so that it will actually change systems and improve the situation.
It does seem like an opportunity for us to really look at systematic changes that have been around forever. And it also it makes me really think of the argument of some problem like climate change being too big for us to take any large action as a country, as a nation, as a people. If something like coronavirus can cause the entire country to have to change tactics and every province, and we have to come up with new ways to do things, it seems like if we wanted to, the ability to change how we go about affecting the environment, our impact on the ecosystem around us, should be something we are capable of also changing with just as much enthusiasm. I don't know if that's something you agree with.
Yeah. The lessons of the pandemic are definitely that if the threat is significant enough, we will take the action. We can take the action to completely rework our economy and to take the actions that we need to take to address the threat. So in some ways, that's a really hopeful thing that's come out of the pandemic, is that, we could take the action if we want to. And there's people who are working on trying to figure out what the actions are, and the government of Canada has taken some positive steps in the right direction to try and get more serious about actually having a plan. We've set the targets, but you need to have a plan of how you're going to get to the targets, and we've been pretty lacking in that. Mm-hmm. So now they're starting to set those targets. There's still some room for improvement, but it is at least a step in the right direction. And the more that people demand action, the better it will be.
So maybe taking it back a bit then, just on an individual level, this pandemic, this year has been a really good time for me and from a lot of people I've talked to reevaluate just what it is we value in our day-to-day lives, and what our routines and our work and how our lives kind of all integrate with that. I think it could also be a very good opportunity for us to then consider how much of our behavior and our approach to things are affecting the climate. And I have difficult times reconciling some of that, because I'm getting a lot more deliveries than before. I pick up groceries from Walmart, and they use way more plastic bags than I would ever use. And I just
Mhm.
every time I feel like I'm just using so many plastic bags. What can I do as an individual looking to change my lifestyle right now or my routines anyway to help better the environment and help better our ecosystem?
Yeah. So, there's three levels of action, and we so often focus on the individual action and the government policy action. And the pandemic has really shown us that those individual actions really do make a difference because they add up, right? So if you wear a mask and I wear a mask and you wash your hands and I wash my hands, that's going to make a difference. That's going to stop the spread. So individual actions are super important. And then it's also shown us that we do need that government support too. We need that policy to say, okay, everybody has to stay home, and people need that support. So those businesses that have had to close, they need some kind of government support to help them through this time of crisis. So for climate, similar kind of thing. Like some of the most important things that we can do as individuals are to change our transportation. So use active transportation, walk more, cycle more, take transit. When people are wearing masks and social distancing, it's actually fairly safe. Shopping local as much as possible, because the businesses that you support now are the ones that are going to make it. And our food choices are really important. One of the biggest areas of carbon emissions, and also one of the most exciting things for drawdown, is agriculture and how food is grown. So it's important. A plant-based diet is important, but it's also just making those conscious choices about where your food comes from and what kind of food you're using. If you're on a prairie ecosystem like we are, sustainably raised beef and grass-fed beef and bison can actually have a lower carbon footprint than industrial raised soy that they've drained the wetland somewhere in South America to grow, right? Making careful choices about those kinds of things is really important. And then you have the government level of support, where you need the government to take action and you need government to help people through the transition. So it's one thing to say no pipelines and no more oil sands, but what happens to those people whose lives depend on those jobs? And the government has to get serious about helping those people transition into other forms of employment. Pandemic has taught us, shown the validity of those things. But then there's a third level, which is in the middle. And that's where we take action as communities. That's where we take action with our friends and our neighbors. And we do things that are really valuable together. And if you think about the pandemic and some of the things that had the most impact on you and on me during this crisis, it's things like the window walk, or it's things like students setting up a joke line so that senior citizens could call in and hear a joke every day, or where they're living in a community. It really makes a difference how those communities are run. So the same thing with climate change. Instead of just eating more plants yourself, find things that you can do with other people, that you can do with like 5 or 10 other people, so that you're impacting a community and creating that momentum. So it's great to eat a plant-based diet, but what about starting a recipe exchange, a plant-based recipe exchange for your community? Or read a book on climate change. What about starting a book club on climate change, so that you've got a group of people doing things together? And that's where we start to really see impact, because it starts to change the whole society, and it creates that constituency that then can make that policy change. And it's not that much harder. You can do it with just a couple of hours a week, but it's where we really make some impact. Think about what you're doing as an individual, but then think about how you can make that happen with 5 or 10 other people.
I love that. I love that answer, because culture and community is always on top of my mind, and creating groups of people that work together and towards a common goal of some kind is always something I get excited about, whether it's in an office setting or it's just a group of friends. And I do firmly believe that things like media and things like social media, things, entertainment even, is long term much more powerful in enacting social change and social policy in people's minds than oftentimes direct political action. It's longer term. It's more embedded into society and into the culture. So creating these cultures of community, these communities embracing these values and showing ways to celebrate these values seems like the most effective way. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it, got this show.
Yeah.
So.
Normally I end on a question of what kind of positive change has this pandemic brought up for you?
Yeah, I think just realizing in a very real way how connected we all are is really positive. That my actions affect everybody else and everybody else's actions affect me, and that we can I mean, I know it's a total cliche and everybody's tired of hearing it now, but we are all in this together, and it's affecting, and also understanding how it's affecting people differently, and it's really revealed some of those fault lines in our society of the people that are working those front end jobs and trying to make it ends meet. And so I think having a light on that is really important, and I think that's a positive thing, and it will actually help us to move forward as a society to create something better. I hope. That's my hope.
We can all hope that. Thank you so much, Joan, for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking your time and joining me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Cody. This was fun.
So that's it. That's this week's episode. I'd like to thank Joan Lawrence from the Calgary Climate Hub once again for joining me. If you made it this far and you've enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that like button down below and hit subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you'd like to get in contact with me, maybe you'd like to be a guest on my show, leave a comment down below or send me an email at cody@cocovidvid.com. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.